Tom Watson was a legend the entire golf world admired. A giant of the game, a champion whose name echoed across decades of fairways and greens. But behind the trophies, applause, and highlight reels, Watson carried storms that cut far deeper than any missed putt. As his career slowly shifted into its later years, the sport that once felt like a warm home began to feel colder, almost as if the game itself was testing him, pushing him through trials no one ever expected a man of his stature to face. His name absolutely stands for greatness, but it also carries chapters filled with conflict, conviction, and battles that unfolded both inside the ropes and in the world beyond them. Back in 1990, Watson shook the entire system when he walked away from the Kansas City Country Club after they rejected a membership applicant simply because he was Jewish. It wasn't just a disagreement. It was a line he refused to cross. Watson, whose wife at the time was Jewish, didn't just see that decision as wrong. He felt it hit his own home, his own family. And if someone tied to his household wasn't welcome, then he wasn't going to stay a member either. Simple as that. When he resigned, he did it loudly. It was messy, public, and it sent shockwaves through buttoned-up country clubs nationwide. That moment showed everyone exactly what kind of man Watson was. He wasn't just a champion in tournaments. He was the kind of person willing to stand tall when the pressure got real. But the drama didn't stop there. In the 1983 Skins game, an event loaded with stars, Watson marched straight up to Gary Player and called him out over what he believed was a rules violation. Golf is a sport built on honesty, tradition, and mutual respect, and calling out another legend publicly was no small act. The confrontation exploded into heated debates throughout the golf world, adding even more layers to Watson's reputation, not just as a fierce competitor, but as someone who refused to back down when he believed integrity was on the line. Years later, another firestorm hit when Watson served as captain for the 2014 U.S. Ryder Cup team, one of the most intense pressure cookers in golf. Being captain was supposed to be an honor, but it turned into one of the biggest challenges of his life. The modern players saw Watson's leadership as too old school, too tough, maybe even out of touch with the new generation of PGA Tour personalities. Criticism peaked after the U.S. team suffered a rough loss, and Phil Mickelson, one of the biggest names on the team, called out Watson's captaincy right in front of the world. That moment ignited a loud debate about whether Watson's style still had a place in a sport that was evolving rapidly. But through it all, Watson held his ground. He stayed true to who he was and never apologized for his belief in discipline, unity, and tradition. Even with the controversies and clashes, one thing never faded. Watson was and remains one of golf's eternal icons. His battles with Jack Nicklaus in the late 70s and early 80s became the stuff of pure legend. Their duels weren't just tournaments. They were full-scale masterpieces, moments of brilliance, tension, and mutual respect that defined an era. Every time Watson and Nicklaus went head-to-head, fans didn't just watch, they held their breath. And then came the victories that carved Watson's name into golf history forever. 8 major championships, 5 Open championships, 2 Masters titles, and 1 U.S. Open. His mastery of links golf, especially at the Open, became mythical. Almost nobody in golf's long history handled those wild, windy courses with the same intelligence and courage Watson showed time after time. Watson stepped onto the PGA Tour in 1971, aiming to shake things up, and by 1973 his career changed forever when he found the caddy who would walk with him through his greatest years, Bruce Edwards. They teamed up at a St. Louis event at Norwood Hills Country Club and clicked instantly. Edwards wasn't just a caddy. He was a partner, a confidant, a steady voice who kept Watson grounded when the pressure hit its highest peaks. Watson trusted Edwards more deeply than most golfers trust anyone carrying their bag. It wasn't just about yardage or club choice. It was about presence, honesty, and a bond that turned into one of the greatest golfer-caddy relationships the sport has ever seen. They built a run of success that still gets talked about by fans and historians today. Edwards became a quiet legend himself, known for loyalty, discipline, and an unwavering commitment to Watson's game. Behind the success, both men faced silent battles. Watson fought his swing at times, fighting doubt even when the world labeled him unbeatable. Edwards had his own struggles, yet he always showed up with the same fire. Their connection wasn't just professional, it was personal, built on trust, grit, and years of walking side by side. As Watson aged, his spirit didn't fade. Even when critics whispered that his prime was long gone, he proved them wrong. In 2009, at almost 60 years old, He stunned the world by nearly winning the Open Championship again. The entire golf world froze in disbelief. He battled the wind, the pressure, and the odds like a man half his age, putting on a performance that felt almost unreal. He didn't win, but the respect that poured in was massive. That week wasn't about a trophy. It was about reminding the world that greatness doesn't disappear just because time keeps marching forward. But Watson's story isn't only victories and comebacks, it's heartbreak, too. The most painful chapter hit in 2004 when Bruce Edwards passed away after his battle with ALS. It wasn't just the loss of a caddy. It was the loss of a brother. Watson spoke openly about how deeply it hurt him, how Edwards was the heartbeat of so many of his greatest moments. The pain stayed with him long after the galleries went silent. To honor Edwards, Watson used his platform to raise money and awareness for ALS research. Fans got to see another side of him, the side that grieved, loved hard, and refused to let a friend's legacy fade. It became one of the most heartfelt chapters of his life. Watson's path to greatness wasn't smooth, and one of the earliest turning points came at the 1974 U.S. Open at Winged Foot. He held the 54-hole lead and looked ready for a breakthrough, but everything unraveled in the final round. That collapse hurt, no doubt, but it also opened the door to something huge. After the round, Byron Nelson, the legendary golfer-turned-broadcaster, walked into the locker room and spoke to Watson. Nelson admired his fearless, attacking style and offered guidance to help him sharpen his game. Watson didn't jump on the offer immediately, but a few months later during the Byron Nelson Classic, he visited Nelson's home. That visit changed everything. What began as a casual conversation turned into a mentorship that shaped the rest of Watson's career, just as Nelson had once mentored Ken Venturi back in the 1950s. Only 2 weeks after that disappointment at Winged Foot, Watson stormed back with his first PGA Tour victory at the Western Open. He erased a 6-shot deficit in the final round at Butler National, proving he had the steel-hard mindset of a true champion. Under Nelson's guidance, Watson refined his swing, sharpened his decisions, and the results came fast. In 1975, he claimed his first major, the Open Championship, in stunning fashion. Making his debut appearance, Watson drained a clutch 20-foot birdie on the 72nd hole to force a playoff with Jack Newton at Carnoustie. The next day, Watson edged out Newton by 1 shot, helped by a wild chip-in eagle on the 14th hole that fans still talk about. Only a handful of golfers, Ben Hogan, Tony Lima, and Ben Curtis, had ever won the Open on their first try. Watson joined that very exclusive club. By 1977, Watson's rivalry with Jack Nicklaus had become the main event in golf, and it exploded at the Masters. The two went blow for blow in the final round, tied heading into the 17th. Watson rolled in a smooth 20-footer for birdie, taking the lead, and sealed his first green jacket when Nicklaus bogeyed the 18th. Fans went absolutely wild. But that was just the opening act. Later that summer, the two squared off again at the Open Championship at Turnberry in what became one of the greatest head-to-head showdowns in sports history, the Duel in the Sun. After 3 rounds, they were miles ahead of the field, setting up a final round that golfers still study today. They traded blows all day long, tied once again on the 17th. Watson stuffed an iron shot and made birdie, while Nicklaus missed. On the 18th, Watson hit an approach to 2 feet, while Nicklaus, deep in the rough, launched a miracle recovery onto the green and drained a 40-foot birdie putt that electrified the crowd. Watson calmly knocked in his own short birdie to win with a record-setting 12 under 268. Third place was 10 shots behind. Their duel was on a completely different level. In 1978, Watson kept delivering greatness. He won 5 tournaments that year but also suffered 2 brutal heartbreaks in majors. At the Masters, he needed a par on the final hole to force a playoff with Gary Player, but he missed a tough 10-footer and watched the chance slip away. Later that summer at the PGA Championship, he entered the final round with a 5-shot lead but eventually lost in a 3-man playoff to John Mahaffey. It was the closest he ever came to winning the PGA, the one major that eluded him forever. The early 1980s only cemented Watson's dominance. In 1980, he absolutely owned the Open Championship at Muirfield, firing a scorching third-round 64 and coasting to a 4-shot win. He finished that season as the PGA Tour's leading money winner for the 4th straight year, stacking 6 victories like it was routine. In 1981, he added another Masters title, beating Nicklaus and Johnny Miller by 2 shots. But his most iconic moment came at the 1982 U.S. Open at Pebble Beach. Locked in yet another duel with Nicklaus, Watson missed the 17th green and ended up buried in the thick rough, a near-impossible chip. His caddy Bruce Edwards told him to aim safely, but Watson famously replied, "I'm going to make it." And he did. The ball slammed the flagstick and dropped in for a miracle birdie, sending the crowd into chaos. He backed it up with another birdie on the 18th to win his first U.S. Open. A month later, he won the Open Championship at Royal Troon, becoming only the third golfer since World War II, after Hogan and Trevino, to win the U.S. Open and the Open in the same year. Tiger Woods would later join that exclusive list in 2000. Watson's final major came at the 1983 Open Championship at Royal Birkdale, marking his fifth Open title and his only one on English soil. His other four came in Scotland, the home of links golf. He nearly won a third straight Open in 1984, but a brutal bogey on the famous road hole at St Andrews cracked the door open for Seve Ballesteros to steal the title. After 1984, Watson's dominance finally began to fade. He went 3 years without a PGA Tour win, something no one expected from a player of his caliber. He broke the drought in 1987 at the Nabisco Championship, proving he still had fight left. Through the late 80s and early 90s, he collected close calls, near misses at the Masters and U.S. Open showing he remained dangerous even when not at his peak. By the mid-90s, he surged again. He won the 1996 Memorial Tournament and then took his final PGA Tour title in 1998 at the MasterCard Colonial at age 48, an incredible achievement. Watson moved to the Champions Tour in 1999 and dominated once again, winning 14 events including 6 senior majors. Even in his 50s and 60s, he showed he could still compete with younger stars. Then came one of the most unbelievable chapters of his entire career, the 2009 Open Championship at Turnberry. At nearly 60 years old, he shocked the world by putting himself in position to win the claret jug again. He led after 3 rounds and needed only a par on the final hole to become the oldest major champion in history. His approach landed on the green but trickled off into a tough spot. He couldn't save par, and in the playoff Stewart Cink pulled away. Watson later admitted the loss, tore his guts out. Even so, the world rallied behind him. Fans felt every moment of that run, and the respect was overwhelming. He continued playing majors for years through exemptions earned from his legendary past. In 2015 at St Andrews, he crossed the Swilcan Bridge for the final time, an emotional moment etched into golf history. The next year, Watson played his final Masters, acknowledging that he could no longer compete at that elite level. But even after stepping away from full-time competition, he still found ways to shine. In 2018, at 68 years old, he won the Masters Par 3 contest, becoming the oldest champion in its history. In 2019, he made his final appearance on British soil at the Senior Open Championship, closing out one of the most remarkable careers ever seen. Every triumph, every heartbreak, every stand he took, together they built the legend of Tom Watson. A champion not just defined by trophies, but by integrity, resilience, and heart.